Yeah, listener, and even before that, in the 1920s, they said there was it was boxing was by neighborhood and ethnicity, and of course, neighborhoods were by ethnicity too. So there were Jewish boxers, Benny Leonard for one, right, the greatest lightweight of all time, unless you think Pernell Whitaker was the greatest lightweight of all time. I didn't see Benny Leonard, so it's easy to think Pernell was the best. I certainly saw all of Pernell Whitaker's career from the Olympics all the way into him winning all his pro titles at lightweight. Then, of course, junior welter and welter also. But either way, look, the thing that boxing became, and this is very ironic, once you start hitting the late 60s, early 70s, and into the 80s, all they would talk about is how sick boxing was. Like, oh, boxing and depleted. And they would kind of harken back for those glory days. And they couldn't get over it, right? Um, and was that true? Look, I think the Don King era was very bad for boxing, right? He was robbing his fighters. He essentially took control of the heavyweight division. No matter what law enforcement did, he had a stranglehold on it. They created the Muhammad Ali Act. He almost got in trouble for that United States boxing tournament he did, but in the end, he stayed above water the whole time. And ironically, the president of IBF, Bob Lee, actually got busted with an investigation that stemmed from Don King. But didn't matter what they did with Don King, he skated, and some guys are like that, right? Look, so boxing might have been sick by the time we reached the 80s, but I think very few people would say the 70s weren't glory days. Even better than the days you're mentioning, listener. You're mentioning really superstar guys, but you're talking in the 70s, the four kings, right? Duran, Leonard, Hagler, Hearns. You're also talking about the glory time of the heavyweight division, Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Ken Norton. God, there's so many others, so many contenders, and champions from the 70s, Joe Frazier, and the list goes on and on. But so it's really weird how we are now. In today's day, people have a hard time saying we're in the golden age again, and we certainly are. Even before Turkey Al Sheikh, boxing was starting to flourish again. There's more promoters. It's not just Arum and King. Like, there's a lot of people making money at it, both fighters and managers and promoters, and that's a good thing, right? The more money there is, the better it is for everybody, and the sport gets better. What they also don't want to do is they don't want to thank the UFC. I mean, I was around when the UFC was still blossoming as a sport. Obviously, I've been here for the whole thing, and during that time, the boxing guys made cynical fun of the UFC, like, you guys are ridiculous, you're terrible. But the truth is, it's the UFC that raised all ships and it's got boxing where it is today in the world scene. Why was the guy from PBC, Heyman, able to raise all that money from hedge funds? Because of what happened with the UFC. He was able to convince them, hey, boxing's been around longer, more depth. I can do the same thing. And they gave him hundreds of millions of dollars. Why is Turkey Al Sheikh there? Because of what happened with the UFC, and people quickly forget this, and I remember I was working at a boxing gym at the time, and the owners were straight boxers, and they said, yeah, well, Brock Lesnar had just won the heavyweight title, and they're like, that could never happen in boxing. And fair enough, they're absolutely right about that. But what they failed to mention is because it's mixed martial arts, Lesnar's background in wrestling very much counted for something. But they were also saying, look, he's just gigantic, and that's why he beats people. And they're not totally wrong about that. But either way, man, it's flourishing as a sport now, both of them. Everybody, read my book, Warrior of the